Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So this presentation is not my creation. This is creation of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples. The knowledge which I have received from them, it is based on that. So all the credit goes to them. Before we start, we have a Instagram channel which we are going to get activated very soon. This is called Life is Sublime channel on Instagram, where our idea is to project devotees' life into digital world to make people more curious and possibly get attracted to devotional life. So if you are on Instagram, please subscribe and you can repost the videos, because when you do that, that's when the social media works. The more you view it, the more you repost it, it gets more popularity. And we want it to get popular because we want to take this Krishna consciousness to all the people across the world. So the topic which I have, as I said, framed today is ISKCON founder Acharya's vision to preserve and spread Lord Chaitanya's mission for next 10,000 years. And this is the vision given by Srila Prabhupada. Interestingly, yesterday was Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. I don't know how many of you joined, but some of you, I know you joined yesterday. It was our founder Acharya's disappearance day yesterday, and we're going to talk about what his actual mood and mission was to preserve this movement for next 10,000 years. So in the early days of our society, Prabhupada gave himself a title of founder Acharya, which actually puts him in a very, very special position as far as our movement is concerned. And he wanted this movement to go on for many thousands of years. But if you actually come to think of it, how some movement can actually go for thousands of years, it's kind of inconceivable. How is that this movement will go for such a long time is actually something which you want to understand today. And one can say this is like a daydreaming, that how is that we can ensure that this movement will go. Because if you see many of the previous spiritual movements in this world, most of them disappeared. And I'll just talk about some examples. Do you know who these personalities? Anybody here? So we have Mahesh. Maharishi Mahesh is there. He started a movement which was called TM, Transcendental Meditation. On the left side you have Paramahamsa Yogananda, very popular figures. And they started this movement back in India. They brought this movement here to the US. So they lasted for some time, but they're not there anymore. What happens is, even if you look at corporate worlds, companies, if a company can last for 10 years, it's a great achievement. Actually, according to Standard & Poor, which is a very well-known body in the US, which talks about markets and stocks and all that. Any guess what is an average lifespan of a company? How long a company exists generally? Give me a guess. 10 years? Give me better than that. Okay. According to them, companies on an average, they don't last beyond 18 years in general. If you see an organization going beyond that 20-25 years, it's a great achievement. Look at the companies like IBM's or Microsoft's and all that. They have done beyond that. There's something special about them. Why? Because the society keeps on changing so rapidly that if the companies don't innovate, if they don't evolve, They're not going to last. They're going to get outdated. Anybody remembers this? Kodak films? Back in the days, we used to have films, right? We'll take photographs. Once it is all done, it will show it is all exhausted. We take it to the, digital lab or whatever, photo lab, and they will, process it, and you will get a physical copy of photographs in a few days. Where did that company go? It's completely vanished now. It does not exist anymore. Why? Because it's all digital. Everybody has a camera now. You don't need to print photographs. You just take on your iPhones and Androids, and you share it on your Facebooks and Instagram. It all exists there. That whole culture of printing the photographs and all that, it's gone. So companies like this who are not able to predict the future, they won't last. And I'm giving this analogy to see how we can relate to what I'm talking about. Of course, companies, they evolve. They have product lifecycle management, so they see how society is changing. They will modify their products. They will see how it can be made more relatable to you and all that, right? So that way, they continuously evolve. But for a spiritual society, it's so different. Because we are not product-based companies. We are not services. We are not company, first of all. We are actually a spiritual organization, which is a conservative society in terms of how we run the society. So if you look at the reason it is so difficult for a spiritual organization is these organizations are built on some basic philosophical tenets or qualities or philosophical theological points which cannot be changed, right? And because of that, it is very difficult to keep on evolving, because you don't want to change the core philosophy of religious movements. But if you go back in time, if you look at Christianity from how it started, from Christianity 0 to 1.0 and all that, if you look at the current state, it has become so many branches. It has really evolved over a period of time. So if you look at the societies, this is one of the examples. If you look at the other religious society, you will see a similar trend. There is a modification which comes in at times to make sure they are aligned to the society, to the changes. But then the point is, if you keep on changing, or the question is, how much do we change? Because if we change so much, then your original message or your original identity is lost, right? The point is, we have to change, but how much do we change so that our original message or original essence is not lost? So if you look at some of these people here, these are, these are some of the charismatic leaders who started this movement, some of these movements. And when these charismatic leaders, they disappear, the whole movement disappears. Like example, when Paramahamsa Yogananda, he disappeared, almost his whole movement got disappeared. They have, but they have. I'll come back to that. It's not as prominent as when the actual leader founded it. You see what I'm saying? They still exist, but it's kind of very dwindling state. It is not as visible or prominent as when the leader existed in this planet. Look at how Rajneesh Osho's movement is still there. The movement is still there, but that charismatic leaders, when they go away, there is an impact to the whole movement. It impacts because they kind of then lose their path. So in case of ISKCON, some of these very famous professors, or we can say scholars in the US, they have been following ISKCON for more than half a decade now. If you look at some of these professors or scholars here, on the left is Dr. Irani. He actually personally met Prabhupada long time back. And then we have, I think that in middle you have Hopkins. I think he also met Prabhupada long time back when in New York, when they called him for lectures and all that. So these scholars are actually surprised to see how ISKCON has continued for the last 50 years. Not just continued, but they have expanded so much. And we'll actually get to see today what was the master plan of Prabhupada which actually set the stage for this movement to go on. Because as I said, if as a spiritual society, if you can continue for a few decades, it's definitely a big thing. But we'll see ISKCON has now like 50 years plus after Prabhupada has disappeared. So the question was, or this is the main topic, what was Prabhupada's mission to preserve this movement? What was that secret mantra he had? What was the secret sauce? So Prabhupada actually realized he's not going to stay here forever. He's going to pass away soon. How is that he can actually make sure he has a system in place to preserve this movement even in his absence? So the first formula he brought in, which actually formed the basic foundation of I don't know if I can start anyways, was the teachings or the books. If you look at just the volume of scriptural knowledge which he has given during a decade of his presence, a little more than a decade of his presence, that is nowhere found in any other movement. If you look at just the influence of his Bhagavad Gita's translation. Bhagavad Gita is a very small book. It's just 700 verses and it probably can be like 15 pages. If you look at Gorakhpur edition, it's hardly 15 pages, 20 pages. But when Prabhupada started writing Bhagavad Gita, he actually gave all his explanations in his purports to explain the philosophy behind why is Krishna talking about this and explaining in detail to make it very simple for anybody to understand. And that book which Prabhu just distributed to some of you, it's actually it's like this thick. Why? Because he has given so much of knowledge into that, given so much of context to make it easy in a very simple language. Because to make something simplify, that's not simple. You're trying to solve a problem. It takes a whole lifetime to solve it. So Prabhupada spent his days and nights just translating Bhagavad Gita. He did not write Bhagavatam. He just translated because all this knowledge already existed. So he did not start something new. This is something which is Sanatan Dharma, which is actually existing eternally. He just translated it. Why? Because he wanted to bring this knowledge in a simple, understandable language, with English, right? Broader world understands English. So he just translated that. So he spent phenomenal amount of his time just translating it. Even when he was traveling around the world, he would translate and he will sleep maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, save the time from there, his own sleep, and then he will translate. So that actually became the foundation of the society, because this whole society is based on scriptural injunctions. And these teachings are eternal. As I said, some of these teachings are from Upanishads, which is Vedas, and Vedas are considered to be eternal. They're always eternal. They're not created. So that way, these teachings are not something which he brought in. These teachings existed when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the teachings, or Krishna's teachings is what he brought in. But these are time-tested knowledge. So first solution which he gave was the knowledge, teachings. Another problem with spiritual society which I was talking about was, he himself saw that his spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he started establishing temples, centers, mutts, and he was printing books and distributing books. So it was a big change which his spiritual master was bringing in India and across the world. But when he disappeared, what happened? The whole movement disintegrated from their point. When Bhakti Siddhanta disappeared, the whole movement disintegrated because there was no system in place, unfortunately, and everybody was trying to become a leader, a guru, and the whole movement got split into small temples, centers with regional gurus and all that. Prabhupada knew that this is a problem which he was trying to solve. So he gave a solution to that. And he established something called GBC, Global Body Commissioner. So this GBC, Global Body Commission, ensures that there is no one single person who is going to lead the society. The society will be led by a group of advanced devotees who are actually well trained in this movement. They are actually we can say the teachings they actually live the teachings. So the role of GBC is to make sure that even if some devotees they fall down, the movement still continues. So he brought this system in place, GBC, Global Body Commission, which actually ensures that the movement gets the oxygen to breathe. Nobody can choke, because if there is one person who is leading it and that person disappears, as we saw in other cases, it's a risk to the entire society. So he brought this system which the previous, we can say, spiritual leaders, they could not envision this, they could not see this is coming. So Prabhupada worked his whole life thinking how he can preserve this movement. And that's why he gave himself this title of Founder Acharya. That gives him a very, very special position in this movement. So that gives a very founding position for Prabhupada in this movement. So he was very careful to make sure that his knowledge is not lost, and whatever he is giving the teachings, that remains the central figure. He remains a central figure in the movement, not just now, but for the time to come. The next solution or the problem he solved was very interesting. He established BBT, Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust. This trust actually manages, you can say, all the printing and publishing of our books. Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, all the books, the printing is handled by BBT. If this was the same society as temple, if the temple falls into some problem, then the teachings, which is actually under the control of BBT, that also will also be a problem. So he makes sure that BBT is entirely a separate trust, not just everything is. So he did not put all the eggs in one basket. He was very intelligent to see how he can mitigate all the risk which he could foresee. So he establishes BBT, Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust, to make sure even if ISKCON disappears, BBT still can continue as a separate independent society through which the knowledge or the teachings given by Prabhupada can continue forever. He established that as an entire separate entity. So that way he wanted to make sure that his knowledge which he is given, through he spent so much of his energy behind giving the teachings, he wanted to make sure that knowledge is preserved forever. So he establishes BBT. This is one of those earliest BBTs, maybe Boston. We also have BBT right across the street, one of the earliest BBT ever. And that BBT printed Chaitanya Charitamrita, which actually is now distributed all over the world. It started right here in Los Angeles. So BBT was another vision given by Prabhupada, that how his whole movement can be holistically preserved, because he knew that after he is gone, these are the problems, and he wanted to solve these problems before he disappears. The question is, why did Prabhupada do that? Well, it is part of his greatness. It is part of his compassion to make sure that this movement continues no matter what happens. It is part of his spiritual Shakti, which gave him this vision to make sure that he can see into the future and then prepare this whole society with a support structure which can actually support the movement for a long, long time to go. But if you look at that era of 1960s and 70s when Prabhupada started this movement, it was a very difficult time with hippies all around, and nobody would actually know what mantra is. They did not understand what the word mantra is. Now mantra finds a place in dictionary. They have a translation now, but back then nobody knew what mantra is. So, you can imagine it was so difficult. Nobody knew what is vegetarianism is. In that era, if somebody was a vegetarian, it was like an ET, extraterrestrial. Where did you come from? Like that. People did not even know what is veggies means, because they were into eating whatever flesh and all that. But he brought in this idea of vegetarianism. That was not his main point, but this was one of the things. I'm trying to explain that preaching at that time was very difficult. People hardly knew what Bhagavad Gita is. If you look today, there are more than 500 million copies of Bhagavad Gita distributed. And here we have two stalwart devotees who distribute Gita every single day. They have distributed more than 1 million copies each, maybe more. Have a big round of applause for these devotees here. I mean, they have dedicated their whole life in distributing books. Why? Because this is the vision of Prabhupada, to give Bhagavad Gita to the world. So that was another thing. Nobody knew Bhagavad Gita, but when he came, he made that as a common word in every town and village. Nobody knew who Krishna is. Now, many people, if you just go to Google and just say Krishna, you get so many things there. But back then, nobody knew anything. So he had to start from ground zero. It was extremely difficult for Prabhupada to do. But it was not just, it did not stop there. It actually meant much more than that. It was an entire lifestyle change, from becoming a hippies to happies. When Prabhupada started, this movement with hippies in New York, back in Tompkins Square Park in New York, if they had long hairs and revolutionary mindset, and they didn't have this receptiveness to hear. But it was because Prabhupada's spiritual Shakti which imparted that knowledge, and from that their heart changed. And it did not took long time. In few months he could see that the transformation was coming, and in a few years he had thousands of disciples across the world. Why? Because of that is purity and the power which he has. So as I said, this is not just a philosophical change, it's a lifestyle change. You have to leave all that behind, your previous life, and start something entirely new. That's unprecedented. History has never seen a transformation like that before. If you look at other acharyas, they have done preaching, but not to this scale of transforming people's hearts across the globe. Not just India, but United States, Europe, Australia, and the rest of Asia. This is phenomenal, unprecedented. Never we have seen any transformation like this. And you know what? I'll just tell about this in the last slide. I don't have it, but I'll just remind me that I have to tell something which is not there. I want to keep that a suspense. So this is a remarkable feat. This is not just establishing a society and going away, but this is making sure you have a system where the system can work on its own, and that will make sure the system produces devotees after devotees after devotees for decades and centuries and millenniums to come. So this is really a long-term vision only a leader like Prabhupada can have. He was really a leader, a visionary who can actually change the society. But this was not easy. Back in Delhi, before Prabhupada came here, he started printing Back to Godhead magazine. And the way he would do is, he would actually have a letter printing press. I'm sure none of you have seen that. I don't know, maybe you have seen that, Prabhu. Letter printing press is, if I have to print Krishna in a paper, I have to arrange each of the letters, K, R, I, S, H, N, A, each letter by letter, making a word into sentences, into paragraphs, into the whole book. He did that himself. Letter printing press. Today, if you just go to Word, if you just have, if you just give voice instruction, it will give the whole print on your laptop. But those days was not easy. He had to, you can see what I'm saying, he had to arrange the whole book break it down to paragraphs, letters. So it was very, very difficult, because there was no technology back then. But he had this vision that I want to do this. In New York, so when he came to New York, things improved. He got a typewriter. So he will type in New York, tuduk, he will type. But that also was not easy. You have to keep on typing literally the whole day when he was translating Bhagavad Gita. So he got a typewriter. So things started changing. But then, when he came to US, he actually got something new. He got the dictaphone, where he can just speak into the dictaphone, it will get recorded, and from there, some of his disciples will actually translate that or put that into a text form and then give it to printing press. But it had its own challenges. At least in typewriter, you can correct it. In dictaphone, how will you correct it? Once you speak, it is very difficult to correct. You have to re-record it. It's not easy. And it's a huge machine. When he will go from one place to another, the servant will carry and run behind him. So it's not easy. So he had few things which were changing, becoming easier, but it was not easy enough. And then came the era of CDs and DVDs and all that. You can do things a lot more easier. But wait a minute, before CDs and DVDs, there was one more thing which was there in between. What was that? Floppy disk. You had a small square kind of a thing, you have to insert inside your lap, your machine and all that. So you had floppy disks in between. And then came a small thing called pen drive, which can have all gigabytes of data compressed into just small device. But then what happened next? Then came internet. Now you don't need that at all. Everything is there on the cloud. Just go there and just play around with that. So with the change of these technologies, now with internet, you can have all the meetings on Zoom. You don't even have to be here. You can watch the darshan online on YouTube from anywhere, right? So the world has changed so much that this is where our world lies in practically. People spend more than half of their time here than in the actual world. This is artificial world, or whatever we can say. And the whole society is changing so rapidly, as I said, from CDs and before that floppy disk to, to now whatever, pen drive, to internet, to Zoom, Facebooks and, whatnot. I was coming there. How many have actually thought 10 years back, AI will actually be so shaping up our life right now? At least I did not think. Anybody here who had this thought of AI will actually be so impulsive now, what we see? 10 years back, nobody had this vision. Of course, if you had the vision, you probably would have founded a company by now. And you would have had our own AI platform, OpenAI or something like that. But most of us, we did not have this vision. The way this world is changing is a very, very radical change which we are seeing. Very, very rapid change in the way, in the pace at which the world is changing. But then Prabhupada, he also responds to changes. Like when he came to the US, he knew that his level of standard is not going to be accepted here. So what he did, he relaxed the rules. He wanted his devotees or his disciples to chant 64 rounds. When they were said 64 rounds, they said, no, we cannot chant 64 rounds because we have to go to work and all that. So Prabhupada relaxed that level from 64 rounds to 16 rounds of chanting Hare Krishna on your japa beads. So he relaxed that. So he responds to change because he knows this society, this world has changed a lot, and it will keep on changing. So he knew that 64 rounds then and into the future is going to be difficult. So acharyas can, like Prabhupada, can change because they're able to see the future. He also, allowed sex life in marriage and all that because, that's how the society is. So he wanted to make sure that is also accommodated in a very regulative way. The point is, he wanted to make sure that this movement is open for all. He was so flexible. Of course, in any case, the process of bhakti is very, very simple. It's very flexible. You can perform it now. You can do it, 10 years later, 1,000 years later, the next day of Brahma, or you can go to Brahma Loka or, heaven. The process of bhakti is very simple. And the chanting of the holy name is the most simplest you can do in any situation. So in that way, bhakti is very simple. But this is the real test for this movement. I'm just gravitating towards the core of our topic today. What is the real test for a movement like Prabhupada's ISKCON? What is our real test? The real test lies with changing society so rapidly, right? In the last few decades, we have seen the society has changed so much that the way we communicate to each other has evolved tremendously. People change. Technology is changing, the whole society, the way the mindset is changing. So when the change is so rapid, how do we ensure that our society remains relevant in this change? How can we ensure it? How do we make sure that we handle this change? How do we run along with this change? How do we apply the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam to a society which is always changing? How do we make sure that it remains very relevant to them? And the point is, if we change, how much can we follow? Because it has to be something which is sustainable. You don't want to set up something which people cannot follow. So these are the main challenges which we have, which as a society which we have to face and go into the next, we can say, era. Obviously, if we don't change, if we're going to keep everything same, we cannot even communicate to people because we'll get outdated. So obviously we have to change. We have to see what is that we can change and what we cannot change. So anyways, Prabhupada wanted this movement to go for thousands of years. And if you are preaching in China, you cannot probably preach in English. You can, but receptiveness will be very, very low. So depending on time, place, circumstances, if you're giving this message in China, you probably want to give in Chinese. In Spain, you want to speak Spanish, right? So you have to see how we have to align to some of these, you can say, customization or the need. So if you look at 1960s, the two main activities which devotees would do in 1960s is book distribution and do Harinam Sankirtan. So, of course, in our society also, people say, let us do only these two things. Let us only do book distribution, and let us only do Harinam Sankirtan. Let us go out to the streets, let us chant Krishna's name, and let us distribute books. Finish. Will not do anything more than this. Of course, this is good. We can only do these things. But is it going to be effective for everybody? Is it going to be effective for everyone? Because the society has changed a lot. So how do we know what we can change and what we should not change, or what we should change or what we should not change? So that knowledge is residing in Prabhupada's books itself. So we need to study Prabhupada's books, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and so many books which he has given, to see and understand what is his true, we can say, what is his true mission. How do we understand what Prabhupada actually wanted? So that is actually given in his books. So we have to study Prabhupada books. So people, some people have, you have received Bhagavad Gita today. It is actually a starting of the journey. Some people just take the book and just keep it on the bookshelf. And that day never comes when you actually open the book and read and accept the philosophy. That is the most important step. So we have to see how we can use, or we can put, or we can take benefit from the knowledge which Prabhupada has given. So we have to read and study the Prabhupada books very scrutinizingly. We have to ask questions. Why is Prabhupada saying this? What was the actual intention behind saying that? And if we have that true intention, you will actually know what you can actually change and what you can actually not change. So of course we have movements like this where you have Ramanuja and Madhvacharya. They are also founder Acharya of their movement, right? You have Ramanuja who started Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. It's a big movement in South India at least. They have presence there, significant presence. They have Madhvacharya who also started a few hundred years after him. The movement is still going on. But are they really expanding? Maybe not. Why? Because they don't have that much of philosophy on which the whole movement is strongly based. Their movement is still going on because of their central figures, or the founders of those movements still are the central figures of this movement, and hence the movement is still surviving. We don't know how long it is going to survive. It is a question mark. And this is not a derogatory comment. I'm just saying that this is the actual fact, because I've seen some of this movement very closely in India. So anyways, when it comes to what we can change and what we cannot change, it's very simple, and I'm going to summarize in this slide from the teachings given by Prabhupada. So obviously Prabhupada has given all his teachings, which is not found in other movements, right? Now, what we cannot change is obviously like points like Krishna is supreme. That point is going to stay forever. We are going to have that as one of those philosophical or theological points which cannot be compromised, which cannot be changed. So Krishna being supreme, or bhakti is a supreme process, or Jiva cannot become God, or Brahman is not the highest, or we don't accept Mayavadi philosophy. So those things cannot be compromised. Those remain same as it is. So those are the pillars on which the movement is established. But what can be changed is the way these messages can be transmitted to the society. Which means that today we have book distribution, which is a physical book distribution. You take the book and distribute. But tomorrow it could be all digital. You may be distributing books digitally, right? So we have to see how we can align to those kind of changes. Today we have Sunday feast like this where people come and they eat together. maybe next decade we may see all this happening online. You may have prasadam also receiving online, where you just register for Sunday feast and we kind of deliver it to your homes. We don't know. Things change so fast. You can have your prasadam online. You can have, I don't know, everything can be online in few years, with few decades, with AI coming in. We don't know. But the point is, the principles we cannot compromise. The principles remains intact. As I said, Krishna being supreme, or chanting Hare Krishna, or we stop chanting Hare Krishna and start chanting something else. No, those things will remain same. But the point is, we are free to experiment how we transmit this message to society. How we communicate this message to society. That is something which we can change or we can innovate. Because if we don't, then this movement is going to get stalled. But Prabhupada's vision is how this movement can go on and on. So if we can help Prabhupada in making sure this movement goes on for many thousands of millenniums, you will please Prabhupada, you will satisfy Prabhupada most by doing that, by supporting how to expand this movement or sustain this movement for time to come, for a long time to come. And by doing that, you can actually become qualified to receive the mercy of Guru or Prabhupada. And that will actually give the ultimate result. You will help transform how we can communicate to society, thereby expanding the movement and thereby pleasing Prabhupada. And by pleasing Prabhupada, you can actually receive his mercy, which means you can actually advance in spiritual life. So, of course, Prabhupada is the founder Acharya. He is, of course, Guru. But in our society, we often talk about Diksha Guru and Siksha Guru and all that. And our scripture says we need to give equal respect to them. But our scripture also says, if your Siksha Guru is more elevated, you have to give him more respect. So in our case, who is our Siksha Guru? Srila Prabhupada. Because all the knowledge comes from him, all the teachings is coming from him. So he is our Siksha Guru. So GBC passed a resolution that he is a preeminent Siksha Guru for time to come. For all the people who join our society, he is our first Siksha Guru, because we take teachings from him. And that way, even if you have not met Prabhupada, even if you have not seen Prabhupada, you still are able to establish a personal relationship with him through teachings. If you follow the instructions of Prabhupada, then he becomes your first Siksha Guru or your teachings Guru, and that qualifies one to have a personal relationship with Prabhupada, even though you may not have met him. But that was a system Prabhupada established so that everybody can connect with him, because that is the meaning of founder Acharya. He is projecting Prabhupada as him, as the Guru who you can connect for time to come. And that is why he is the founder Acharya, he is a central figure. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita's introduction, there is a disciplic succession which Prabhupada has documented in Bhagavad Gita. You can see in your Bhagavad Gita as it is. There, Prabhupada is tracing this disciplic succession or the parampara. This is actually a teachings parampara, Siksha parampara, not a Diksha parampara. So here also Prabhupada is emphasizing the point that Siksha is more important than Diksha itself. Diksha is when you get a secret Krishna mantra from your Guru to do deity worship as per Pancharatrik Vidhi or Pancharatrik system. But Siksha is where you actually get the knowledge, and that Siksha knowledge is what keeps you connected with Prabhupada, keeps you connected with the society. And that is the ideal way of expanding. So I'm just going to summarize our discussion. So Prabhupada wanted this movement to go on for many, as I said, thousands of years. And how did he do that? First, he gave all the teachings in his books. You don't have to actually go beyond the books and say, I will try to find something new, and maybe something is not there in this books. I will try something, whatever, read some other books which he has not given. If you just happen to read and study Prabhupada books, that itself is enough for us to actually go on for a very long time. Because all the answers are on his books. His teachings is complete. The next solution he gave was establishing GBC, just to make sure there is no one single point of failure, but it's a system of devotees who push the movement into the future by establishing global body commission. He creates BBT. He creates this as an entire separate trust which can actually make sure his teachings in the form of books is preserved for a very long time. This is a trust which is separate than ISKCON. Even if ISKCON, ends up in a problem or whatever, God forbid. But BBT can continue forever this BBT, because it can continue forever, they can keep on publishing books and transmit this knowledge to society. And that way his teachings will be preserved for a long time. And of course, Prabhupada gave him the title of Founder Acharya, which puts him in a very, very special position as far as our society is concerned, as a central figure to make sure the whole movement is we can say, governed by his teachings. The whole movement moves around this central figure of Prabhupada. Because if we have many people coming into picture, it will always give rise to conflicts. And the last was, if you want to please Prabhupada, then we have to see how we can keep this movement together and expand it together by following his instructions given in his teachings. So I'll stop here to see if you have any reflections, questions, comments. Feel free if you have any questions, reflections. Yes. Prabhu.
At one point when you were mentioning about the other sampradayas, it just caught my attention, something that you mentioned, that the Ramanuja Sampradaya, Madhvacharya Sampradaya. At one point you just mentioned they don't have the philosophy, and then I thought, oh, no, they do have the philosophy. I understood it this way. They have many books, they have many instructions, but what I got from this is that they might not have something that the Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya Sampradaya, of which we belong, was the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu 500 years ago, where he says, Priti Vite Achenate Jate Nagarada Grami, go and distribute this knowledge to the whole world. In every corner, my name should be heard. Lord Chaitanya, of course, we know is Lord Krishna. So that probably is something that they, because they do convey their message maybe among, like in India itself. They're very famous and popular, and they have so many, the scriptures, they're rich. But the difference will be, like in ours, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave that order, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, which is the guru, Srila Prabhupada, he carried on that order, and then he came to Europe first, and then the whole rest that you just explained all over the world.
Yeah, so thank you, Prabhu, for the point. I think one very, basic thing which other movements do not have, which we have, is Harinam Sankirtan. Of course, they also have Harinam Sankirtan, but they don't give so much emphasis to Harinam Sankirtan. That, if you look at some of these societies, Sri Vaishnava Acharya, we also have like some temples here, I think in Malibu and all that. Their main emphasis is deity worship. So for example, if you look at their movement, they will offer the same bhoga every single day. There is not much room for flexibility or improvement. So what happens is it becomes very rigid, like a very Vaidi Sampradaya, where it is very not flexibility in terms of how you can bring in more variety in the system. So that was one. But if you look at our thing, we are free to cook so many things and offer. So if you look at the places like Tirupati or Srirangam, they offer the same curd rice for last thousands of years, and they will do the same thing. And then the way they will decorate or do Shringar for Vishnu or Ranganath, it's the same, all everyday white, or it does not give you that much of flexibility. So in that mood of Aishwarya, you can only see the Supreme Lord as in the Aishwarya Bhav. But here you see another thing is where when Mahaprabhu's movement, when he gave Harinam Sankirtan, which is very, very flexible, you actually slowly accept Krishna in one of those forms.
Can you explain the word Aishwarya Bhav for the newcomers?
Sorry. So I was just explaining. Aishwarya Bhav is where actually you see Krishna as a Supreme Lord. Like how is he seen in Dwaraka or in Mathura? They actually see Krishna as Bhagavan. But in Vrindavan, they don't see Krishna as Bhagavan. Like right here, Mother Yashoda is tying Krishna. If she had this conception that Krishna is Supreme Lord, how can she ever bind it? She did not have this conception. She always was seeing Krishna as her own child. So that is possible only when you have a little bit of flexibility in how you perform your bhakti. It's more spontaneous. So in that way, Prabhupada's movement, if you see, or you can say Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, it gives that flexibility to have that spontaneity development. Otherwise, if you look at other sampradayas, it is very rigid and a lot of awe and reverence is there. But coming back to this point, I think the main element which we have as ISKCON, and they don't focus so much, is Harinam Sankirtan. They also have philosophy, but are they reading Bhagavatam every day? Do they have Bhagavatam classes every day like we have? I have not seen that.
In the sharing, bringing it to the world.
Yes,
Yeah.
And then taking that knowledge, not just limiting to a specific zone, but expanding that knowledge beyond their scope, which is India, and then going across the world. That happened only with Prabhupada. So that was the game changer which Prabhupada introduced in this whole movement to bring the bhakti cult to the Western world. And places like Los Angeles, now people are taking benefit of this process, which is not just a process which takes you to a higher destination, but it gives you the highest result ever possible in the realm of spiritual practices. Yes?
So I started with transcendental meditation since I was like 5 years old in Fairfield, Iowa. And so I know everything about Maharishi. And one thing I've noticed with Krishna's consciousness here is, first thing is you give things out for free. That's a big deal. You give out the books right now for free. There's prasadam, that's for free. So transcendental meditation, they really like to charge you a lot of money. And I mean, it works to a point, but there's a limitation. Like, I think one thing that really opens up to people's hearts, especially if they have certain hardships, is that they're all welcomed. And I think that's a beautiful thing that I see. And I recently just I went back to Fairfield, Iowa, like last Christmas, and I was like, what is going on? Because it felt like the movement just, it's kind of, unfortunately, like an old folks home just only. There's no young energy there. But there was, like my mom and my dad were both hippies that followed the movement and they went to MIU, the whole schooling and everything. I started meditating when I was 5 years old, the whole movement. But it's stagnant. And there's not like a live energy still there with Maharishi like I just see right here. So I was like amazed that that you were having this talk, because it really related to what I've experienced.
Thank you for the reflection, because, and when Prabhupada was here, not just these movements, he would, so how did this temple came in? This was the church before. This church was literally dead. Nobody was used to come. So Prabhupada saw this here in Europe, and that's how he convinced those people who were having the church, give it to us, we will manage it. And he transformed this to such a lively place, not just today, but for the last many decades and for the years to come. Why? Because of the process which he has given of chanting Krishna's name, studying scriptures, and applying those scriptures in our life. But unfortunately, other movements, they don't have that much of focus in philosophy and putting that into practice. And over a period of time, they disappear, they stagnate. And you gave this live example of how TM has, changed so much. So,
Yeah, so thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank
Now
you.
I understand. When I went back home, I was like, this is so sad to see.
Yeah, it's all his mercy. It's all Prabhupada's mercy. He had this vision to see how he can establish a society, forcing into the future how society will change and making sure this society can go on for he had a vision of 10,000 years. So, any other questions, reflections? Okay. If not, then let us all pray together that this movement established by our founder Acharya, dear Srila Prabhupada, we can follow these teachings and expand this movement for the next many millenniums to come. Thank you so much for your time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.